One APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Tonight's episode of Out in Front is brought to you by our season sponsors, Nevada State Education Association, One APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt.
In the lobby area of the legislative, rotunda, I guess you'd call it. It's not that fancy here. But I'm already joined by our first guest, Steve Sebelius, who is with the Review Journal. And we are going to talk about legislative session because legislative session is underway. I'm here in Carson City with all of our fabulous guests tonight. And so we're excited to have you. So remember, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We will get to all of the audience questions over the next 45 minutes. We are going early tonight because the Nevada Women's Lobby is actually having a training tonight that Holly and I are on with Marlene Lockhart and others. So make sure you tune in after Out in Front to that. So, Steve, it's legislative session. We're here again together in Carson City. Talk to us about what you think will get done this session and what you think kind of the vibe of session is going to be.
Well, it's going to be a lot different from last session because you now have divided government, a Republican governor, Democratic legislature. I think there'll be some early tests that the Democrats will present to Governor Joe Lombardo. We saw one today as Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro introduced her first bill, which would codify the protections for women who seek abortions coming from other states where the practice is illegal to Nevada where it's legal. The state cannot participate in any of those prosecutions. That's her first bill. It's an executive order. It's the rule now, but it soon will be the law because that bill is almost guaranteed to pass. I predict it may even pass with some Republican votes because there are Republicans who would support it on a states' rights basis. So you will see a few tests, I think, early on in the session for things like that.
What else do you think gets done this session? There's been a lot of conversation. You and I have had a lot of conversation about this. When we have a divided government, sometimes things get done and we are shocked, and sometimes nothing gets done. So what do you think actually gets done this session?
Well, the first, to back up a little bit, anything that gets done will have to get done through a little bit of consensus, because even though the Democrats in the Senate and the Assembly may all agree, Governor Lombardo may not always agree. And so all the laws that are passed, the ones that are serious, people who are serious about passing laws, they're going to have to do that with an eye towards what will the governor sign. So I think that evidence is a need for some compromise. There'll have to be some compromise. If Steve Sisolak had been reelected, I think you would have seen a completely different dynamic in the session. There would have been more expansion, I think, of in a lot of areas. This bill that Senator Cannizzaro presented today would probably already have been signed into law, and it's only day 4. But I think there will be some need for some kind of consensus between the two parties, and that'll be on every issue. Issues such as voting rights, I think, are an important one. Healthcare is going to be an important one. Affordable housing as part of an overall package involving how we deal with homelessness, and especially homelessness in urban areas, including Las Vegas. Those are all going to be, I think, top issues for this legislature going forward.
My next question, speaking of negotiations, is, I know this is thinking way ahead, but a lot of our team has really been discussing defense. I think the progressives will have to be on defense to protect a lot of the good things that we worked on over the past several sessions with the legislature, with Governor Sisolak. So what do you think happens we call it the end game, right? The budget negotiations. We get the economic forum back on May 4th. What do you think then that end of session kind of negotiation looks like from there?
Yeah, it will be. I think progressives are still going to play in a very important role, and not just the role they play during the political time, where moderate Democrats can triangulate between Republicans and Democrats who are more progressive by being attacked by the progressive wing. I think now is the time that progressives serve the other and very important a role, which is to serve as the conscience of the Democratic Party. The compromise is good. I think durable change can only come through compromise, but also Democrats can't forget their principles. And I know that the progressive movement, Battleborn Progress in particular, is there to remind Democrats in the House that, yes, they want to get bills passed. They want legislation to be signed by the governor, but at the same time, there are certain principles that really shouldn't be compromised and certain issues that have got to be brought to the fore. Because there are a lot of people, there are a lot of lobbyists in this building. We see them all the time. There's going to be hundreds of lobbyists, probably 12, 13 lobbyists per lawmaker. I think it has been in past sessions. But there are no lobbyists for certain communities, certain people who have nothing, and someone has to speak for them. Someone has to remind the legislature as they do their business in this nice building, in these nice heated halls, about people who are not in that environment, who are in the cold, who are in the heat, who have nothing, who can't afford housing, who can't afford mental health care, and things like that. And I think that's going to be the role of the progressive community throughout the session, but especially at the end game.
What about vouchers? That's been obviously a big topic of conversation with the governor. That's been a big topic of conversation. During the State of the State speech, he was talking about school choice, which is vouchers. He was talking about opportunity scholarships, which is vouchers. What do you think happens with that conversation, and how do you think that unravels over the legislative session?
Yeah, well, the true voucher, which is taking public funds that would have otherwise gone to a local school district and sending that to a private institution, there will be a bill about that. Scott Hammond will introduce a bill built on the ESA model that was once passed and has since been repealed. That will come up. That will not pass. Democrats are not going to roll that back. They are not going to support that in any way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean that other forms of school choice, like you mentioned, opportunity scholarships, where businesses get tax credits against what they would otherwise owe to the state for kids to choose to go to private schools, get private tutoring, things like that. Charter schools under the umbrella of the school district or under the umbrella of a municipal government, which we've seen in Las Vegas, notwithstanding the fact that no local government in the Las Vegas Valley is chartered to run an educational institution. They're still doing it. They have various legal means to get around that little problem. We'll see some of that. We will see some of that. And there may be some room even for compromise in those areas. But in terms of ESAs and actual vouchers, public money going to private institutions, I don't think we're going to see that happen. And even Governor Lombardo, I think, realizes that.
I hope so. Okay, we got a couple questions in the chat. 2 questions. Where is Steve Sisolak now?
Well, I have heard that Steve Sisolak is now on a sort of a tour. He is now at the University of Chicago's Institute for Politics. He's there with Tim Ryan and Beto O'Rourke. So apparently this is a, what not to do if you want to get elected type seminar. I have heard that there may be even bigger things in the governor's future after that in terms of academic institutions that focus on politics and policy. So we'll keep an eye on where Governor Sisolak goes from the University of Chicago, but he's there for the winter and spring fellowship.
That's awesome. All right, Steve, what do you think will be a major bargaining chip toward the end of session for the Dems? So we talked about that. What about voting rights, though? Like, where do you think that falls in terms of the end negotiations?
Yeah, I think with voting rights, Nevada can be very proud. It has done so many things to make voting easier and more convenient. probably more than any other state. This state, pardon me, has gone the opposite direction of so many other states that have put restrictions and limitations and barriers in the way of people who want to vote. Nevada has gone the other way, largely due to its Democratic majorities that have constantly expanded voting rights. I do not think that the Democrats will allow even the slightest retrenchment of the gains that have been made so far. So that, I think, is off the table. Now, there are things that can be done. For example, in the news conference today, Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar was asked about moving the deadlines back. He said, instead of doing that, we need to make sure that the counties, local governments, especially Washoe and Clark,
speaking of him, he's right there,
have the capacity to count more ballots more quickly so that the deadlines wouldn't need to be changed, but that the majority of the ballots, the majority of votes would be known on election night. I think that meets the Republicans' objections, and I think that's probably something we could get some compromise.
Awesome. Speaking of the Secretary of State is walking by right now. Here's Secretary of State. You want to say hi to our viewers?
Hi, everybody.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you. That was funny.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know when we're talking about voting rights. He just appears. Okay, let's see what the next question is. Do you think we will see any progress on a rent cap?
On a rent cap? That is a good question. I think probably, Winston Churchill said, Americans are great people. They will always do the right thing when they have exhausted all other alternatives. And I think that's probably going to be the case here. Rent control, rent caps, I think, are going to be probably the last option that is done. There's going to be a million things that are done ahead of time. And there's a lot of things that could be done with very little effort that could improve the chances of building affordable housing. Tax credits, infill development, waiving fees, changing zoning laws to make it easier to do that. Notwithstanding the objections, I'm sure, of nearby residential neighbors who don't want those kind of projects there. They have to go somewhere. Affordable housing is a pressing need in this state, and it's one of the pillars of fighting homelessness in this state. If we don't have affordable housing, then everything else we do on mental illness, substance abuse, job training, all of that is for naught. There has to be affordable housing, and I think everyone recognizes that. But I think rent caps are probably going to be among the last things that are tried and the most difficult to get passed, I think.
Next question. I think this is a good one. It's from the state of the state. So Lombardo is saying he wants to use the budget surplus to prepay the gas tax. Am I crazy, or is that a waste of money that could be spent on other things like, and I'm just going to add in education, mental health issues. The 18 cents we save on gas could go a really long way for the state of Nevada.
Well, I think that the governor and perhaps even the questioner is making a presumption. That is that the price of gas will fall by 18.5 cents, which is what the state pays in taxes, as opposed to gas companies, individual service stations not passing that savings on, which is very possible. I heard someone make a remark to the effect of, it would have been better had they paid car registration,
yes.
Well, at least a flat fee towards car registration, so everybody would have gotten the same kind of relief. We all also pay that in addition to the gas tax. So we're presuming that savings will be passed along. But yes, the answer to the question is yes. Gas prices have fallen. They're still not as low as they were when President Biden took office, but that money could be used for something else. And as Treasurer Zach Conan said in a news conference earlier today, there's been calls to put more money away in savings, and the rainy day fund is now at the maximum that's allowed in law. It's 20%. It is now at the maximum, more money than's ever been in there in the past. And he said, look, at this point, it doesn't make sense to save more when we have all these needs. And I think that's going to be a very strong Democratic talking point as we go through. And Governor Lombardo wants to put more aside, understandably so, because, the next recession, the next pandemic could wipe out all those savings and could cost Nevada everything in the rainy day fund in a very short period of time. So it's a prudent move, but the question is priorities. Do you save when you have these other needs?
Okay, last two questions. How successful do you think and I'm personally passionate about this one, how successful do you think the raise the age for buying guns will be? And just for the viewers at home, this is one of our priority bills as BBP. It's Assemblywoman Sandra Howdige's bill, and we're working on actually 3 gun bills this session, hate crimes, this one, and another one to prevent guns from going to election sites and polling locations. So speaking on the raise the age, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think voting is a fundamental constitutional right, and there is an age requirement for voting. So I don't think there's any constitutional questions that are raised about a minimum age to buy firearms. Now, I'm sure at the founding, when the Second Amendment was drafted, that age would probably have been like 12. And I think the state of Nevada,
have AR-15s.
Right, they also did not have AR-15s, and I think that the age for Nevada would probably be older. I think 21 is probably a reasonable limit there, and I think that could I think that could be proposed. I think it could pass. I don't know if the governor would support that. But in addition to that, if the idea is to keep guns out of the hands of people who are younger, less mature, less able to appreciate the consequences of what can happen with a gun, then safe storage is something that absolutely needs to be done. There's been work done on that in the past. There's been liability for people who carelessly leave their weapons around that are then used in crimes and violence. So I think that's more work probably needs to be done on that as well.
All right. Another question for you. What do you expect to see from Governor Lombardo in terms of cooperating with the Democratic legislature? You and I have talked a lot about this because he doesn't have a lot of experience in a legislative body. It's been all in law enforcement, police, and
Right.
and what does that look like now?
Yeah, in fact, we talked about this the other day. The only experience that he has with legislative compromise came at the hands of Governor Sisolak, who was then County Commissioner Sisolak, and they were loggerheads over the approval of more sales taxes for police officers. Governor Lombardo, then Sheriff Lombardo, was in favor of those sales taxes. Then Commissioner Steve Sisolak was against them. So he is kind of in a whole new world. And we talked earlier about the Democrats and the need for compromise, but the flip side is also true of that. The governor is not going to get everything he wants. He, during his State of the State speech, was reportedly very upset that some of the things that he had announced that he thought would appeal to Democrats did not get Democratic applause. That was sort of his first introduction to the sometimes harsh reality of politics in Carson City, that you're not going to get praise, even when you think you're telling the other side, I'm going to give you what you've been asking for a long time. So I think there's going to be a learning curve. Luckily for him, he has people around him, including Ben Kekeffer, his chief of staff, who's a longtime state senator here, who kind of knows the process and can hopefully inform him of that. But we're talking about the governor himself. I mean, Joe Lombardo is the governor. He is the person who's going to sign these bills. He's the person who ultimately is going to negotiate some of these things. And so how he personally will deal with intransigence and with people who fundamentally disagree with his philosophy on a number of issues, that remains to be seen. And that's something we'll be watching very closely.
Absolutely. Okay, last question for you, Steve. What progress in education do you think we will see this year? I think that's a really important topic that we haven't talked about. And I think with this surplus, what does that mean? Because maybe, just maybe, they could, potentially fund education correctly for once in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my pet issues, and it really defies easy answers. We look for easy answers, more money, better grades, things like that. There are so many factors that go in to student performance, things that are completely outside the control of teachers and principals. They have absolutely we ask principals and teachers in the state to be social workers, to be police officers, to be psychologists, to be social workers, and they are not trained for that. That is not their job. But the things that are happen outside the classroom that they have no control over affect directly what students can do in performance. Also, we're coming off the pandemic and the schooling at home, which did tremendous damage, I think, to learning and education and the whole cadre of students that are going through the system right now. So I think there could be some progress made. I think there will be a major investment in education, more so than there has ever been, I think, in the past. And the question then becomes, once we invest that money, what are we going to see in return? If we don't see improvements, if we don't see some progress, then I think that's going to be a problem. cycle, because people are going to become very cynical, and they're going to say, no matter how much money we put into this system, it never pays off. Well, it's not exactly like a slot machine, right? It's not exactly like Megabucks. You put your $21 in, you lose, and you go on your way. This is a completely different thing. It's literally an investment in the future, and I think it's going to be very difficult to say, okay, for each dollar we're going to get this. But the fact is, we can't not do those dollars. We have an obligation to educate students for the future of the state, for the future of this country, and so now it just becomes, how do we do it in the smartest way possible, the most effective way possible, and who gets to say what that is? And I think you're going to see those debates in the education committees and also in the finance committees throughout the whole session.
I agree. All right, Steve, my team loves you. Ignacio on my team is a huge fan, so is Shelby. So I wanted to make sure I told you that. But yeah, thank you for always joining us, and thanks for all you do.
Yes,
all right, we'll see you throughout the session.
I'll come out in front once it gets to be spring.
There you go.
Yeah,
we'll actually go outside.
Yeah,
thanks,
absolutely.
Steve.
Sounds good.
All right, we're going to bring on our next guest, who is also standing next to me, Holly Wellborn, who is she is with Children's Advocacy Alliance now, but she is also our board chair of Institute for Progressive NETA. Come on in. Here she is, everyone. Holly, introduce yourself. Tell them your background. Tell them how we know each other. All that good stuff.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be back on the show. I love Out in Front. I'm glad to be back in the legislative building. I'm Holly Wellborn. I'm the new executive director of Children's Advocacy Alliance. I started in early January. My background, though, has been in the legislature. I've been in this building for a long time. I think most of you know me from my time at ACLU of Nevada. But we're looking forward to working on children's issues and pushing forward on putting in those, protecting those progressive policies that start at the very beginning of one's life.
Okay, so talk to us about the bills that the Children's Advocacy Alliance is watching this session and the types of issues that y'all watch for, work on, stuff like that.
Yeah. So Children's Advocacy Alliance, it's what the name says. We advocate in the areas of safety, education, economic well-being, and healthcare for children. I like to describe it this way. So we're very focused on the what's happening to kids at the very early stages of life, beginning with pregnancy, and ensuring that moms have access to health care, that they have postpartum care, that they're able to access housing and the services they need in order to ensure a strong start in life. And of course, following that through until the age of 5, that's when they have the best outcomes for kids. But then we also focus in other areas when we assess that those systems have failed young people. And it leads to things like over-institutionalization of young kids. It leads to issues with school-to-prison pipeline issues. It leads to issues with that child growing up. And so we are also focused on ensuring for those that we have failed early in life, that we put in those supports and get those kids on track later in life. So some of the bills that we're looking at in the area of healthcare, very hyper-focused on Medicaid. There are a lot of things happening nationally. You can Google this. There's the unwinding of Medicaid coverage that was extended at the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are about, I believe, 14 million people nationwide who are going to lose healthcare coverage once this unwinding starts to begin. And so different states are putting in different systems in order to ensure that a lot of people don't lose coverage. There's also fiscal cliffs where, there's programs that are going to end that people have begun to rely on that were funded through ARPA funds. And so a lot of those programs are at risk. So we're really fighting for a few things Medicaid-wise. We're postpartum care, extending that to 12 months after a child is born. It used to be 60 days, and we're going to be supporting efforts to extend that time period. We're also fighting for continuous eligibility for children, which actually has passed at the federal level. So we're very excited about that. And we're also looking for extended coverage for pregnant persons. So those are some of our healthcare related bills that we're looking at. And another thing in that area of early childhood, what was really noticeably absent from Governor Lombardo's State of the State address was childcare. No one's really talking about childcare. What supports are there to ensure that, people can return to work? If we look at the impact that lack of childcare, especially after the pandemic, has had on the workforce, it's quite staggering. There have been, entire businesses, even here in Nevada, that are really struggling because people can't find care for their kids. So we'll be fighting to get some child care legislation passed this session too.
Okay, we got some questions in the chat for those at home. If y'all have questions of Holly, put them in the chat now. We also have Christine coming on in a second. Just a reminder for those of you at home, Holly and I have been doing this since 2005 together. So we've been up here this is our 10th session together now. So we've been doing this a long time. So if you have questions about the process, if you have questions about what's going to happen this session, our predictions, questions on certain bills, we can try and answer those too. So put them in the chat right now. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Okay. Couple questions that have come in. Will asks, how do you think Lombardo will be treated by the hard far right faction of the Republicans like Ira Hansen and others?
I think that it's going to depend on what direction he takes. So I think if you're looking at things like voting rights, which our organization has been very deeply involved in, civic engagement policies and work also. But I think if we take a look at voting rights, they might be happy with some of the hard lines he's taken there, things like voter IDs, things like that. But I also think that there are some hopeful things that did exist in Governor Lombardo's budget that some Republicans might not like, that involve, an investment in, pre-K, pre-kindergarten, investments in coverage for pregnant persons. That's, a huge and that exists in the current budget right now. And so I think as they're starting to fight over funds and determine where that money goes, that he might see some pushback in that area. So, I think we're not dealing with the furthest right wing governor right now, but I think that we're going to see a lot of touting to the base of extremists.
Y'all, we're in the wild now, so you're going to hear things like a vacuum cleaner, apparently. So just deal with us, because this is what happens when we're literally in front of the building, but inside. So sorry about that, but that's what happens when we're in the wild. Okay, Holly, this is from Wood Tunes. Can the surplus monies be used for childcare and other needs and services for young people?
Yes. And that's kind of the goal. It's like, let's look at some childcare legislation. Let's look at some legislation that might be an avenue through which we can try to get some of that funding. It's really to provide childcare in a meaningful way. I think it's about $50 million to kind of boost those existing funds in the Child Care Development Fund. So right now with these surplus funds, it doesn't seem like quite a lot of money, but there's a lot of people in the legislature who are going to be asking for those surplus funds to be applied in a different way. I think that it goes hand in hand with the housing argument too, those stability creating policies and stability creating investments are going to be very important. And that's where we'll be fighting for the shift in those funds that might look very different from what exists in the current budget. So yeah, I do think that those funds could be used in that manner.
All right, Donna's asking, does Children's Advocacy Alliance advocate for children with disabilities?
No, I'm sorry, do we do advocacy for children with disabilities? Yeah. I misunderstood the question. I thought you asked if the budget included.
No, just your organization.
Yes, yes, absolutely we do. And historically, we've done a lot of advocacy for children with autism, have fought alongside Legal Aid of Southern Nevada and the System of Legal Services Providers to expand applied behavioral analysis and other therapies for children with autism. And we certainly work in that space to help fund, families that might have medically fragile children. We definitely work in that area.
Great. Next question. Does Lombardo's proposed budget currently show any changes to childcare funding?
There's one change in there that's a transfer of funds from TANF dollars.
What are TANF?
TANF dollars is what does TANF stand for? Temporary Assistance for Needy Families funding, which fund, a lot of emergency services where people can actually get cash on hand for a variety of different services, whether that's housing, potentially childcare. You could use those funds for childcare. But there is a proposal in the budget to transfer some of those dollars to the Child Care Development Fund. But it's, we would prefer an investment of new monies into that child care development fund, because those TANF dollars are also something that people rely on for that emergency assistance when times get very, very hard. And so we don't want to deplete that bucket of money either, especially when we're at a surplus.
Next question is Lombardo stupid enough to veto bills for babies and kids?
I don't think that we can expect a whole lot of vetoes in this area. I think there are really good things in the budget, like we were talking about, keep pre-kindergarten investments. We'd like to see universal pre-K. The $65 million in the budget doesn't quite get us there, but it's a start. I think that, again, we've seen coverage for extended coverage for pregnant persons. That's huge. That's a huge policy that people across the country have fought for. So in a way, there's lots of proposals that he's already has and he's already advancing. So I think that it's anything outside of that could get in the way of advancing his agenda that potentially might lead to a veto, but I think he'd have a hard time vetoing them.
Me too. Okay, last question from Guadalupe. She asks, is it possible for the governor to improve the unemployment office by hiring more agents and improving customer service to process quickly unemployment claims? And I can take this one. I actually think Governor Sisolak actually already started that under the leadership of Elisa Cafferata when she was there at the office. And so that is something that was actively being worked on during the pandemic. And then as we've started to move out a little bit of the pandemic, because the pandemic is still here. But that is something that Governor Sisolak made a priority during various special sessions. We testified on that many times. This body took action. Governor Sisolak took action. And that is something that is still actively being worked on. So, yes. Okay, Holly, before you go, I want people to get involved with your organization. How do people do that? There's a question in the chat. How do we learn more about CAA? So what are you doing and how do people get involved with your org?
Yeah, we have a few ways to get involved. First, subscribe to our listserv. You can go to our website, caanv.org, and you can sign up right there on the front page to subscribe. Every Tuesday, we are going to have a policy briefing, a legislative briefing on what to expect in the coming week. Those will be at 11:30 via Zoom. You can sign up and join us for those meetings, and you can find out more about that on our website as well. And of course, follow all of our social. Our handle on all platforms is at CAA Nevada. So yeah, follow us there and follow along with everything we've got going on.
And we'll put some of the links in the chat for y'all so you can follow along with Holly and her team's good work. So make sure you sign up. They're going to have a Children's Advocacy Week coming up. So if you have young people and they want to come up here and learn about the legislative process, that's another great way for them to get involved. But lots going on here at the building. So we're definitely going to need you all to sign up for that. Cool. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Go beyond the Nevada Women's Lobby. Tell them I'll be there in a second. All right, Christine, you want to join me? While Christine's coming over here, if everybody could join the feed, Matilda on our team and her chickens have set up a new news information site where every Friday we're going to be sending out an email on Institute for Progressive Nevada. Matilda will put the link in the chat to sign up, but if you want all of the latest and greatest from the NV Ledge, and all the work we're doing up here, all of the news hits that we're doing up here, we can get that to you every Friday, and Matilda will make sure that you are subscribed to the feed. So sign up in the chat. Thank you, Brian, for dropping that. All right, Miss Christine, welcome back to the show. Thank you. I feel like we do this every session together. Christine is usually my first guest. Christine, introduce yourself and the good work you do at the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Saunders. I am the policy director at PLAN, which is much shorter to say than Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. And we work on a whole variety of issues, including environmental justice, economic justice, civic engagement, immigrant rights. So I'm kind of in all of the spaces in this building. I often joke I'm the only person who starts the morning in the Judiciary Committee and ends the day in the Natural Resources Committee. So I feel like I've got a pretty good perspective of what's happening around
Christina and I spend quite a bit of time together in this building. She texted me today. She's like, where are you? Are you hanging out somewhere different? I'm like, no, I'm just not there yet.
There were like 6 hours where I hadn't seen her. So it got weird.
It got weird. All right. So Christine, what are you all working on this session? And what is the what are the priorities for plan this session?
Yeah, and I definitely like thinking through, like I was listening to your previous guests. Holly mentioned one of the things that wasn't mentioned in the State of the State was childcare. Another one of those was definitely housing.
Yes.
And housing,
it was a glaring error and omission.
Yes. And so we've been working on housing with the Nevada Housing Justice Alliance for the past 3 years now to really advance tenant protections legislation. And so had a bunch of bills last session, only a few moved forward, but we are back. We've brought back all of those kinds of proposals. So rent stabilization is on the table. There is a bill for it. So regardless of what Steve Sebelius says, that conversation
We're doing it.
is happening. Also looking at other tenant protections about ensuring that you're not paying multiple application fees of hundreds of dollars, or that if you don't get accepted for a unit, you get that money back, because landlords can just make a lot of money by accepting hundreds of applications for one single unit when they charge $100 for that. Also looking at local control of housing issues. One of the most frustrating things, I think, for those of us who do this work is that no one wants to take responsibility of that needing to take action on housing. So they send us back and forth between the city, the county, and the legislature, and really wanting to clarify that previous laws that have already been passed do allow local governments to take action. And this is important because while I do want to push a lot of things at the state level, we know that living in Nye County and Washoe County and Clark County are very different experiences. And sometimes it does make sense to have very specific policies to the things that those constituents are facing.
Absolutely. Okay, so what are some of the bills you're watching this session? Like, what are some specific things that people need to watch for? And like, what are some specific days, actions people can take specifically on housing bills?
Yeah, so we have the Housing Coalition. You can follow it through Plan. So our website is PLA-Nevada, all spelled out.org. Just one N there. That's like the biggest mess up. Or go to nvhousingjustice.org, and you can sign up for our information there to be on our listservs. We are definitely planning a lobby day for housing. Also planning a lobby day for environmental justice work and for immigrant and refugee issues. So we'll send out the ability to sign up and come with us. Take a bus up from Las Vegas if you're located down there. Make sure you pack a jacket to come to Carson.
Yes.
And so we'll be pushing a lot of those things throughout the next few months. But talking about other important dates, one of the most important dates that we're all thinking about here is April 14th. And that day is the first committee passage deadline. So if you're following bills coming out right now, we don't have a lot. We're still waiting on text. When a legislator puts in a bill, it's called a BDR, or a bill draft request. And there are over 900 of those right now. But we only have about 200 bills that we actually have the language of what's written in them. It's going to take a bit of time for us to get all of that, read them, analyze them, follow up and see if there are things we want to support or oppose or just stay out of entirely.
Yeah.
And then that April 14th deadline is the major date for things making it across that first hurdle. And if they don't, then that bill no longer continues in the process.
Yeah. And I think, we'll drop the link in the chat for the 120-day calendar, also the events calendar. You need both of those calendars to stay up to date on the legislature, because those calendars kind of dictate what happens at the legislative building, what's happening for lobby days, what's happening for grassroots lobby days, for all the different advocacy days that all of our fabulous partners have. But also those deadlines, if you join us on the Progressive Summit, we talked about this, those deadlines where bills have to get passed by a certain day, those deadlines are hard and fast unless a bill has an exemption on it. And so those things you need to know to stay up to date on the legislative process. So really, really important for you to have those links, and we will put those in the chat. All right. What other things are you following? I know you're like us. You work on a little bit of everything. I think the only thing we don't work on is like animals. We were talking about that yesterday. But like, what other things are you following maybe when it comes to water or in the environment? I know you all do a lot around that.
Yeah, so we're also a part of the Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition, or NEJC, and we have a couple priority bills. Assemblywoman Sarah Peters has two, one really looking at how we can advance environmental justice in the state government, and then another that's a green amendment, so it would add protections for clean air and water into our state's constitution. And we've also been working on an outdoor worker protection bill, because one of the things we've continued to see is with the rising temperatures in the state and then the increase in wildfires is that all of our outdoor workers are working in extreme heat or in terrible air quality. And we just want to make sure that they are provided all of the adequate protections that they need while they're on the job. So that's a proposal we're working with. And then we're also following a number of the things that came out of the interim Natural Resources Committee. There will be a big bill on conjunctive management. Water law is very wonky and not my expertise area, but
very complicated.
That will be a major topic of the session, as well as directing the state to do a study on environmental justice, and the next interim to do a study on agencies that regulate natural resources. So there's lots of different spaces there too. We also follow voting rights legislation
together.
So definitely watching to ensure that we don't roll back any of the protections that we have passed as a state over the past few years. Folks who have seen me before know that I love vote by mail. And that is going to stick around in Nevada
yes,
forever.
It is.
So that was a great win that we all worked towards. And I know that our legislative leadership is very proud of that as well. So wanting to just make sure that we don't have any steps backwards with the attacks on voting rights that are happening across the nation.
Anything around healthcare that y'all are watching, or, other kind of rights restoration, that type of stuff?
Definitely following some of the reproductive health.
Yeah, I'm excited about that stuff.
So I think actually Senator Cannizzaro announced today that she has put out a bill draft request.
It's on our social. Follow along, friends.
To codify the executive order, ensuring that Nevada is a safe place that folks can come for abortion services. So that's definitely something we'll be watching. And I know that there are a few other things about accessing telehealth with our partners with Planned Parenthood and NARAL that we work closely with. So following all of those kind of spaces in all the variety of coalitions.
Yeah. And then some of the other things we're watching too are like Medicaid bills, Medicare bills, making sure folks in the community have access to those services as well. The reimbursement rates for those things, what Medicaid actually covers. That's been a big topic of conversation. And mental health. That's going to be another big issue that we are following along with.
Senator Donassi actually mentioned earlier this week at the Latino Legislative Caucus's press conference that he is pursuing a bill to expand Medicaid coverage to folks regardless of citizenship status, which is really wonderful in the state because we want to ensure that everyone has access to that preventative health care, because that makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got a couple questions in the chat. So this one is, how can we use bills and issues that we care about to get Governor Lombardo on the record? And I know this is something I've talked a lot about with you. We need to be strategic with that, but he needs to have a voting record. Yep. He didn't have one during the election. That was a huge problem.
And I'm going to have to jump in a second because there is the first evening hearing of the session already.
Me and Christine are doing double duty tonight.
But we've talked a lot about what the veto process is. And so when a bill gets to the governor's desk, he has 5 days, excluding Sundays, during the legislative session, and 10 days if the session has ended, to veto a bill actively. If the governor doesn't actively veto a bill, it does automatically become law. So any bills that we get to the governor during the legislative session, we will have an answer as to where he stands on that priority within that time frame that we can then move forward with. And I think people will have to, in the next few weeks, we'll get some things where we can really see, like, where does he stand with Nevadans on these issues?
Absolutely. All right, Christine, thank you for joining us. How do folks follow along with PLAN, and how do they get involved with the good work you're doing?
Yeah, so PLAN, I mentioned our website. It's also PLA Nevada on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm pretty sure we have a TikTok that our comms team can drop in the chat because I know they're watching. So we're on every social media thing. And again, sign up on our website for our email list, and you'll get all of our updates and invitations.
All right. Thanks for what you do.
Awesome.
See you upstairs.
Thank you.
All right, friends. So that is out in front for this week. Sorry, we had to go a little early, but things are already off to a busy start. We're going up to the Nevada Women's Lobby meeting that Holly and I are presenting on. Then I'm going to the Finance Committee to watch some of the bills in there. So lots going on already. We will be out in front every Thursday, either here inside the building or outside the building now. And we will be doing legislative updates every week. So you're going to want to follow along with us to make sure you're getting the latest and greatest from Carson City. I am here full time this session. Our team just got back to Las Vegas. They're going to be up here intermittently throughout session. Follow our Facebook, follow our Twitter. We will have live updates every single day. on what's happening during the legislative session so you can follow along with the process, and we will do it for you. You don't have to do it. In addition to that, like I said, sign up for the feed. Matilda is doing an amazing job with that. She's going to be sending out news articles every Friday from Institute for Progressive Nevada, our 501c3 sister organization to BBP. And you can get those updates live in your inbox every Friday to catch you up on all the latest and greatest news from the NV Ledge. And remember, we will be here out in front live normally at 5 on Thursdays, but you can also sign up just to get our regular emails from us. And you can come up here to Grassroots Lobby Days with us. We'll be supporting the Nevada Women's Lobby, Grassroots Lobby Days, and Equality Days this year. There's also 100 other legislative lobby days. So if you want to sign up to go lobby in Carson City with us, we are taking volunteers to do that, and we would love to have you. So, well, here's the treasurer if you'd like to say hi. Treasurer Conine, oh my goodness.
Hi, everybody.
Say hi. You're on out in front.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. So excited.
We were watching what you were doing today in the committee, so good job.
Well, excellent. We're very excited for everything that's coming. I hope you all come out tomorrow to our budget hearing at 8 o'clock, where we will be pushing for the treasurer's mansion. It's not the world's best use of funds. But what we found through the process is just deeply expensive to put a pool on the second floor.
Oh, gosh.
We think aesthetically it's necessary.
Yeah, that's right.
Anywho, thanks for all you're doing, everybody. See you.
Thanks, treasurer. Our treasurer is the funniest one around. We love him. All right, y'all. So that's it for Out in Front this evening. You never know who you're going to run into in Carson City. There's always somebody popping by. So you're going to want to tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. And hope we see you next week. Let me know if you all have any questions. We're here to answer your questions on the legislative process. And I hope you will join us over on the Nevada Women's Lobby event that is started at 5:30 that I'm going to go run to give a training on right now. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week on Out in Front. Have a great evening, everyone.